We are storytellers by nature, sharing with others what we experience, perceive, and believe of life, our joys, adventures, our losses. We tell ourselves stories as well. Some leave us trapped by false beliefs and self-doubt. But there are also stories of persisting, exploring, and rising above. Stories of uncovering the truth, enabling powerful transformation and triumph. These are those stories. These are your stories. Hello, folks. Welcome to And So It Is, Stories of Truth, Transformation, and Triumph. I am the eponymous Zoe DeMuro. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a spiritual counselor, a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, who's hosting this wonderful show, and a transformational coach. My ministry and my mission are to help people co-create their most authentic and most fulfilling life experience. It's my honor to bring the show to you the first Saturday of each month, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. If this is your first time, great to have you here. And if you're returning, welcome back. In each episode of this show, we'll hear how people like you, people like me, who have been held back by false and limiting beliefs, uncovered their truth, enabling them to transform their life experience and then literally to triumph because of their spiritual journey. So, without further ado, let's get on with today's episode. I want to tell you that if you've seen the show before, you'll know that a number of the topics that we cover are difficult topics. They're things that reach to our very core, and sometimes they can even be frightening. If you feel in any way discomfort with this particular topic today, know that you can always just watch the recording, taking at your own pace. And I'm going to share some resources at the end of this episode so that you can feel a sense of support and comfort. So today, I'm going to turn over the interviewer role to my sister from another mister, or as we said in Brooklyn, a sister from another mister, the exceptional Rev Kim Andrews, so that I can be the interviewee. So let me get this set up here. Welcome, Rev Kim.
Here I am. Hi, Zoe.
So Rev Kim is the spiritual leader of Unity Spiritual Center Sachse in Sachse, Texas. Mm-hmm. And I asked Rev Kim to help me with this episode because we're going to discuss what could have been an absolutely devastating experience in my life. But rest assured, there is absolutely a transformational victory to be heard as well. So, Rev Kim, I'm all yours.
Okay. So, Zoe, let's put this in context. Tell me when and where does your story begin that you're going to share with us today?
Okay. So we're going to go all the way back to the 50s. I was asked to write an autobiography one time, just a little piece. And this was the first sentence in it. I was born into a time, a place, and a family that worshiped everything I was not. So we start with that. You've probably heard children are meant to be seen but not heard.
Yes.
That was definitely true in my family. But the specifics of what I wanted to get into today have to do with an event that happened when I was 9 years old. So I, at that time, belonged to the Catholic Church, and I was what they called an altar boy. So I assisted the priest in the masses, the service, and I was a particularly good altar boy in that I remembered the prayers well, and I knew how to do all the things that I needed to do. So I was kind of on call during the school day when there was a visiting priest that wanted to say mass. And I got the call to support a, what's the word I want? Missionary, that's the word. To support a missionary who wanted to say mass that day. So crossed over from the school over to the church, which was like just right next door, really. And did what I needed to do for the service. But at the end of the service, I went back into the dressing room where the altar boys would change out of their robes into their street clothes, and he followed me. And I don't need to be graphic, and I will not be, but I will simply say that he abused me. And it started as a frightening experience, and it turned into in essence, an out-of-body experience.
Mm.
I was there physically, but completely checked out mentally. And I remember very little at that time. I remembered very little of exactly what had occurred, although over time things came back slowly and shockingly. But I do remember very vividly being back in the schoolroom, and we had a closet, a wardrobe that had all these hooks where you'd hang up your clothes and your bags and stuff. And I remember being in there and not wanting to come out because I knew something was wrong. And I was afraid that as soon as I walked out, everyone was going to know. And, we use the word closeted around sexuality. Well, this was closeted around the abuse. And I realized I couldn't stay in there all day. Otherwise, I really would be in trouble. Mm-hmm. So back, and the rest of the day was a complete blur to me. I went home, and my mother was there, and it was just the two of us in the house. My older sister was out doing something terrible because she was a wild child. My older brother was probably at a class. Father's at work. And I just couldn't figure out what to say to my mother. So I just blurted out something about a priest. I don't remember what words I used. Mm-hmm. But I remember the look on her face. And it was anger. Anger. It wasn't shock. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't love. It was anger. And it was like, how could you? How could you say such a thing about a holy person? You're mistaken. You could not possibly have experienced that. No. We use the term gaslighting.
Yes.
Right? That's not a term that I typically would use. Certainly not something that I knew at all. I never heard that word before, but boy, I understood the concept. Mm-hmm. back at that. And I love science fiction movies and science fiction shows. And there's this thing when a robot is given some impossible to manipulate piece of data, and they just kind of fritz out. That's kind of
Yeah.
what
Okay.
I just couldn't understand how I could be so wrong. I couldn't understand how I could be literally so evil, because that's what my mom thought I was.
So that was your takeaway from that, that you were the evil one.
Oh, that's where it started. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So at the tender age of 9, I knew that there was a way that I could comfort myself, because I knew how my father and my mother comforted themselves.
Hmm.
Under the kitchen sink, we kept our alcohol. And I began drinking alcoholically at the age of 9. I did another whole episode about addiction, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail with that, but I will say that it was another layer of protection at that time, because it allowed me to not think. And it was my gateway as I got older to drugs, which were far more powerful and far more capable of hiding. So I started with the idea that I was evil, started with the idea that I was wrong, that my knowledge, my viewpoint wasn't important,
Hmm.
and that I had to hide. I needed to hide in order to protect myself.
So you're even deeper in this closet.
Yeah.
You're even more closeted than before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the alcohol allowed you not to think, but also not to feel.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That numbing was a very important thing for me. And when I couldn't numb myself, I would be violently ill.
Mhm.
I spent many visits in the doctor's office as a young boy, and the doctor told my mother that it was my nerves. And I remember my mother turning to me when the doctor said that. And I don't think she slapped me, but I know that she turned to me and said, "What do you have to be nervous about? You're 9 years old." I was like, I didn't know what to say. So I then proceeded to allow the alcohol to numb me whenever I could. And I proceeded to bury that experience as deeply as I possibly could from my conscious mind.
Yes. What did this? What were your thoughts about your mother? What did you believe about her
Hmm.
after all this? And did those beliefs change
Um,
with her reaction?
I had considered my mother to be my safe harbor
Hmm.
prior to that. My father was a violent man, very strict disciplinarian. And it was either his way or you were wrong. That was all there was to it.
Yeah.
So my mother would soften the blow. Although she also would often resort to the wooden spoon. My father had the belt, my mother had the wooden spoon.
Hmm.
And I remember one time when she broke the wooden spoon on me
Wow.
and I had to get a new one. I was like, oh, okay. That was normal. We didn't know child abuse. That wasn't a term.
Sure. But if there was any
So,
safety in the home, it came from her,
say it
not
again.
your father. So if there was any safety in the home, it came from your mother, not your father.
Right. Right.
And until this reaction after the abuse. And now there's no safety. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
The only safety that I was able to find to a certain extent was my older sister.
Hmm.
She was 10 years older than I.
Okay.
And she was only there for a very short time. Actually, by that time, no, come to think of it, she had already moved out. She had already moved out. Because abuse was rampant in our family.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay. So she needed to get out.
She needed to get out.
Yeah, she needed to get out.
Yeah. So I had lost all of that support. I had
Mhm.
lost all of that safety. So I decided that the only way for me to survive was to become whatever it was that they wanted me to be.
Hmm.
And my mother had a cousin in Italy who was a priest. And she adored him. And my parents decided I should become a priest. That was going to be my goal in life, to become a priest. And I'll tell you, Reverend Kim, I had, at that point, by the time I was older, I was like in, let's say, my mid-teens, I had buried this completely. Absolutely buried it completely. And I even went into the prep seminary, which was high school years. And I realized in the prep seminary, this wasn't for me. This wasn't what I wanted.
Sure.
I didn't trust any of the priests. I didn't trust what they were teaching me. I wrote a paper on the myth of the virgin birth across religions, which got me sent to the dean's office.
I'm sure. You in your paper.
So here I was again, being, in essence, told my viewpoint, my thought process, it's wrong. So I jumped into drugs big time, and I left home when after my father had given me a beating this one time, and I had actually, as he went to hit this one shot at me, I blocked it, and the look on his face was terrifying. Put my hand down, so he popped me good, and I was like, "That's it, I'm out." So I left.
How old were you then?
Going on 17.
Oh, still young. So young.
Yeah. I did, strangely enough, manage to finish high school. I actually finished high school with reasonable grades. And I even got into Fordham University in the Bronx, in New York. But I almost never went to any classes at all. I was a raging alcoholic at that point. So I continued to hide, and decided I would create my own reality. Since actual reality didn't work for me, I'd create my own.
Sure. What did all of this do to your self-worth, self-esteem, or was that even relevant considering you were hiding with the drugs and the alcohol?
Self-esteem was something that I gave away, in essence. I've spoken to many clients over the years about self-esteem, and they'd say, "Oh, so-and-so took my self-esteem, or so-and-so affects my self-esteem." And I said, listen to the words that you're saying.
Mhm.
Okay. Self-esteem, not other esteem, self-esteem. My self-esteem was non-existent. I had to find ways to make people like me, make people want me to be around. So drug dealing worked. That worked well.
Because you have something somebody wants.
Exactly.
Yes.
And they were always glad to see me.
Yes. Hmm.
I just see we had somebody join. Hello, Patrick. Thank you for being here. Let me see. So you asked me. Go ahead.
At some point, something changed for you. Is it coming up? Is it in your 20s? Is it in your 30s? And if so, what was kind of the pivotal point?
Okay. So there's a whole lot of history that goes between that point and the real point of the beginning of a change for me. But I would say that the real beginning of a change for me didn't come until I was 30.
Okay.
My mother was dying of cancer at the time, and my drug abuse was just off the charts. And she had been given this drug compound which had the name Brompton's cocktail. I'll never forget that. And it was a mixture of a variety of things that would ease the pain and the anxiety for her, but she never wanted to take it because it would take her out of consciousness. And here I was trying so desperately to avoid consciousness. And after she died, there was a bottle of this stuff left behind. And my father said, look, I don't want this in the house. I want this around. Bring it back to the hospital. So I got in my car, which was always an interesting thing, because I usually drove high. I mean, to the point I didn't even know where I was half the time.
Yes.
So I was on my way to the hospital, and I remember pulling over and thinking, why am I going to give this back? Nobody's going to know if I gave it back.
Mm-hmm.
This would be awesome. And it was right then that I could feel something within me that screamed, no, that's wrong. No. And it wasn't that's wrong, like you're a bad person, that's wrong. It was, please don't do that to yourself.
Yes.
And I knew I needed help.
Mm-hmm.
So got a shrink. And the shrink said, okay, we're going to work this through. But you have something that you have to do. And I said, what's that? She said, you have to go to AA. Or NA. Oh, I don't even know if NA was in existence yet, Narcotics Anonymous. And I said, no, absolutely not. And she said, well, would you be willing at least to talk to somebody, a friend of mine who I know has recovered from alcoholism and from addiction? And I said, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. So she hooked me up with this guy, Mike. I don't remember his last name. And I sat down with him and he said, so tell me what's going on. What are you involved with? And I told him, and I told him everything about the alcohol and the drugs. And I finished talking and He opens his wallet to show me his badge. He was a cop. And he said, okay, I'll give you a choice. I can arrest you right now for dealing, or you come with me to a rehab. And there was no way I was going to go to a rehab, but there was no way I wanted to be arrested. I had escaped so many times.
Ah,
I mean, the stories about that, and those are great stories. Idiotic. So I went to this hospital with him, to this rehab, and I saw all these guys shuffling around in their, their pajamas and stuff. And I said, look, if you leave me here, I will die. And he said, you won't. I said, I will. He said, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a B12 shot. He said, I get B12 shots here all the time to keep me going. Turns out he had terminal cancer.
mm,
I didn't know at that time. So I got a B12 shot, and he became my first sponsor. And I had to call him every single day. And I had to tell him what meeting I had gone to. I had to give him phone numbers that I had gotten, give him names.
okay. Really holding you accountable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was my first sponsor. And then I picked up another sponsor who was a total whack job, but he was perfect for me because he said, okay, there is life. There is still life outside of the abuse, outside of the addiction. So that was the start of being able to recognize that I had a possibility, that I had a chance.
Okay.
I mentioned the abuse. I actually had not mentioned it to him because I had still had that buried deep within me. Okay, so 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so for all those years, I had managed to bury it deeper and deeper and deeper. The next big thing that changed for me was complete shock. Complete shock. I was dating a woman at the time who had a lot of self-esteem issues. What a surprise. Don't choose up too much.
That's right.
Somebody's going to be on an even keel. And I remember feeling so sad that she had those issues. And I was like, but you're such a good person. You're so wonderful. You're so this, you're so that. And she said, but you don't understand. I'm damaged. I'm damaged. I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was raped. And I said, oh, babe, I understand. And she said, you do? And I said, yes, I was. And I mean, however, I don't know which one of us had our mouth hanging open wider and our eyes bulging wider.
That's right. Yeah. Did I just say that one of those moments? Yeah.
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 I was like, if you'll excuse the expression, holy shit.
Yeah.
And we cried and we cried and we cried. And we held each other. And I realized that I needed to do something about this. So I don't remember if I went back to the same therapist or if that was when I got the new therapist. It's kind of a blur. Sorry, got the shakes. So when I spoke to her about this, she said, look, I can certainly work with you on this, but I really want you to meet this other therapist, because he's got a group that he's forming called Adult Survivors for Child Abuse. And he will understand. He had been a Catholic. He had been an altar boy. He knows. And he has a program that will help. So I went to speak with him, and he was just the nicest guy. And he was so easy to talk to. And he said, look, I don't want you to survive this. I want you to thrive, right? Because of this. Or no. I want you to thrive in spite of this. The because of this part, that actually came later.
Yes.
So he said, yeah, I want you to thrive. And he said, actually, kept the manual, and it's called Survivor to Thriver. So that's ultimately where that came from.
It's a big difference, surviving and thriving.
Yes.
Yes.
And the idea that I could thrive was truly a godsend. That gave me hope. And I threw myself into that program. It was a weekly program, and it was a support program, a mutual support program. And people with every type of abuse came to that. I mean, there were people who had, and don't need to get into the details, but even more horrific than mine, significantly more horrific, things that it was so difficult to hear.
Yes.
But there was such an importance in being able to speak your truth. And that word truth, that became a shield. It became, I don't want to call it armor, because I remember my therapist pointing out to me that I had armored myself. At that point in my life, I had become a bodybuilder. Now, I don't mean like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I was like about 230 pounds. I was muscle everywhere.
Yeah.
And I did that to protect myself. I felt if I was big enough, nobody would mess with me.
Yes.
And I was convinced that I needed that armor. And I remember the therapist telling me, the more heavily armored you are, the more difficult it is for you to feel a caress, for you to feel that love coming through in that tender and beautiful communication. So it's like,
How wonderful was that to hear that? Yes.
That was huge. But that's a big ask.
Yeah, it is. When you've got this suit of armor on, emotionally, mentally, physically, and perhaps spiritually as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about spirit. When I was in my 12-step program in AA, AA was very Christian focused and very God focused. And I remember at the beginning, at least the meetings that I went to at that time back east, because I grew up in New York, they would start the meeting, start or end at some point with the Lord's Prayer, which starts with "Our Father who art in heaven." And I refuse to say it.
Yes.
plain and simple. The idea of God, that was really problematic. God the Father. Sorry, no, I rejected that. I had rejected all religion at that point. I just could not see. Now I'm kind of back a little bit in my story, because this was actually early on in my sobriety.
Okay.
So it took me a while to grow out of that. And I was, my wacky sponsor said, okay, you don't like God as the Father in heaven? God, group of drunks. God, good, orderly direction. So, okay, I can stay with that.
Yes.
So that became my focus for a while. And I had mentioned that feeling within, the one that was screaming, no, don't kill yourself, in essence. And I could feel this light within me.
Ah,
There was something that was there, and it had always been there. I one time did a talk to a group about addiction, and I had drawn an outline of a body, and I said, when I got rid of the alcohol and drugs, I felt as if I had taken out the entire contents, and I was just this empty outline. But I realized that even with that outline, there was still that center, this encapsulated something that was not harmed.
ah,
And I realized that the way I just did that with my hands, that's exactly what I was doing with my thoughts as well. I was encapsulating it. So my desire was to open. My desire was to figure out how to fill my life. And I don't think it's any surprise that when I speak of what I do now, I always talk about people having a fulfilled and fulfilling life.
yes. Filling being the operative word. Yes, fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I went on a quest. I went on a quest to find God. I figured God had to be somewhere. I knew God wasn't the old white guy in the sky with the big beard and all of that. And if any of you do feel that God is the guy in the sky with the white beard and all that, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way. I'm simply talking about my own perspective.
Yes.
Okay? Please. I bear no malice to anyone's viewpoints on divinity. But I knew what I needed. So I started to explore. And wasn't too thrilled with Christianity in general. So I decided I wasn't going to look in that direction. And I had a Jewish girlfriend who said, "Oh, why don't you, look at Judaism?" And I said, "No, I don't think so. It doesn't feel quite right." So because it was still, in essence, the idea of the God outside, and the stories from the Bible and such were still there was a vengefulness that didn't feel quite right to me.
Yes.
And again, no disrespect, people, no disrespect. So I started looking at Eastern religions because none of the Western religions seemed to make any difference, really. I looked at Buddhism in particular, and there were things there that really struck me. that really made sense to me. I had an extremely hard time encapsulating all of it, probably because I was misinterpreting so much. You know, it's easy to think of the idea of having no attachment. Well, if I have no attachment, how do I do anything? How do I enjoy anything? And life is suffering. It's like, so I had all of these bizarre notions that weren't quite accurate. I was misinterpreting what was coming my way. So I started to dig deeper. And I found more and more that I liked, but it wasn't resonating deeply enough. I will say that there was one particular thing that, two particular things that really stood out for me. One was the idea of pain and suffering, how different they are. In Buddhism, there's the way they describe it is two arrows. The first arrow that is shot at you is the pain. The second arrow is the one that you shoot at yourself, causing suffering as you resist, as you argue.
Yes.
And then the other aspect that was so important was namaste. I say it all the time. There are many interpretations of that word. The one that I love the best is the God in me recognizes the God in you. Sound familiar?
Sure does. Sure does.
So I knew Buddhism had elements that I liked, but I could not reasonably call myself a Buddhist. It didn't feel right. So I just kept going to different churches and different religious organizations, and I found a bunch of them that were interesting, but they felt too secular in some ways. I mean, there was even one that was like a humanist movement that disavowed any God at all, and the idea of humanity being God, if you will, and that didn't resonate. And then a former client of mine, I've left out all the stuff about what I did for work. That's unimportant for this conversation. But a former client of mine sat down with me one day and she said, you've been searching. And in all of our conversations, I wanted to say something to you. And she handed me a book from Science of Mind. This big textbook. This big textbook.
Yes, it's big.
Okay, and you can tell from the folded pages and all this. It was well used, but when she handed it to me, I opened it up. I read the first page, and I said, "I don't understand what in the name of God this guy is saying."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I don't think this is going to work." And she said, "Okay, wait a minute." She handed me a magazine, that the Science of Mind magazine, and it was articles, and it was taking the principles, taking the ideas, and putting them into a context that I could understand.
Yes.
I said, "This is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful." So she said, "Well, we don't have churches per se, not in the strict sense of the word, although that actually isn't true. Many places call themselves churches." She said, "We have spiritual centers. And this is not about religion. This is about spirit." So that was my first introduction to New Thought.
Okay.
Right? So I came in through Science of Mind. And she said, there are a couple of places here in Oakland. I'm in Oakland, California. So there are a couple of places here where that are really good. And I think you'd really like them. So she suggested one place. And she said, "Are you really going to go?" I said, and this was reminiscent of that first sponsor.
Yeah.
I said, yes, I'm really going to go, and I will call you and tell you what I thought.
Accountability.
Yes, yes. So uh, I went the very next Sunday. I think I had seen her on a Thursday, and I went on Sunday. And the place I went to is actually a beautiful building. They have this exquisite stained glass in the front that is just exquisite, just so beautiful. It was the only thing that made it look like a church.
Okay.
Um, but it was just so stunning, and the way the light would come through it in the morning. And I sat as far back as you could possibly sit within sight of the door
Mhm.
because my intention was to check it out and then get the hell out of there. I cried through the whole thing. The music was different music than I had ever heard in a spiritual or religious environment. Um,
Certainly different than Catholicism. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And the message that came across, it wasn't about scripture. It was a talk, and it was human, and it was valuable, and it touched my heart in a way that was incredible. And this opened this. It was
Yes.
a flow. I could feel it within. I could feel it around me. And this is what I've been waiting for.
Mhm. I know that feeling. Yes.
And I was determined to still get out of there as quickly as I could because I was a mess. And I got hijacked by a couple of people. And unlike other places where I had been where it kind of felt cult-like and was like, "You will be coming back to see us, will you not?" These were people who said, "We really hope to see you again. You would be so welcome here. Look around. There are all sorts of people here." And it was true. And I went back
Okay.
every Sunday. And I learned about science of mind. I learned about new thought. I learned about understanding how my humanity and my divinity are who I am.
Yes.
I found hope, but not hope as in, oh, I hope this works. But I know that my life will be better because I have hope. And remember that outline?
Mm-hmm.
Remember the encapsulation?
Yes.
The more I open, the more fulfilled, the more fulfilling my life has become.
Yes.
It's been, what, 8 years now that I've been a part of this philosophy, this way of life. And I have been gifted with the most magnificent opportunities. I have been gifted with the most incredible invitations to be who and whose I truly am. I have self-identity. I have self-worth. I have self-esteem. I have before me, here I am, I'll be 75 in September. I have before me, who knows how many days? I don't know. Who knows how many months, years? I have no idea. But I have the opportunity every single time I open my eyes to make that day fulfilling.
Yes. Yes. Ah, big breath. Yes. I think, what I've heard and felt is as your transformation started, that you started to feel again. You used the word feeling and touch quite a bit. And so there was this, as the armor fell away, as you peeled back those layers, as you came out of that closet of pain and protection, you found your truth. You found you. And in a place and in a way that no one can take from you. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Truth with a capital T.
Yep. And the thing that I have learned over the past several years is that as important as it was to have reached that point, it's like when you think of the horizon, all right, you stand here at the base, you look out at the horizon. But as you move further and further from that base, the horizon widens.
Yes.
That's where I am in my life. Taking steps forward, allowing myself to see how things change, how things grow, how things expand.
And now you help others do the same. You've done it for me with my story. And now with this show and the other work that you've done, you are a light bearer for others.
Yes.
Is that would you say that's one of your greatest triumphs through this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To be able to use light bearer, that's exactly the way I look at it. And I tell people straight away, it's like, I will hold the light while you dig.
Yes. Ugh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Zoe,
Oh, thank you, Reverend Kim.
for being so transparent, for going so deep, for being willing to be vulnerable here in front of an audience. And because this is how we bear the light for others.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wear these bracelets sometimes. It's a company called Sachse, ZOX. I don't get anything from them. I'm not advertising. But the one I have on today in particular says, through the darkness.
Through.
Yeah, through it. And that's why that light is so important. Because darkness cannot stand up to the light.
Yeah.
Hatred cannot stand up to love.
Yes. Capital T truth.
Yeah, I had mentioned that that bio piece that I had written. Very last sentence says, it was to be many, many years before I finally found my way into the world, which is to say, into my sense of self.
Yeah. That I see as the salient message today. Yes, finding yourself. Yes.
So, folks, I want to encourage you, if you are dealing with abuse of any type, reach out. You can reach out using any of these resources. You can reach out to me directly here, zodemiro@gmail.com.
Mhm.
Right? Never allow yourself to be held back. Do anything and everything that you can to open. And if you're not ready, but you want to be, if you are what I used to refer to as willing to be willing, good. Encourage that. Hold self-compassion. Know that, and I say this every time I pray on the network, you are loved and you are love. You deserve the best. All right. Well, let me see. How do I want to wrap this up? First of all, thank you, Reverend Kim. It has just been absolutely wonderful for me. I so appreciate you. Folks, if you would like to share your story, whatever your story might be, where you have taken that journey from limiting beliefs to transformation and to triumph, it could be anything. We've seen so many different things. We've been doing this show for almost a year now. Be a year next month. We've had all sorts of different transformations. So if you would like to be a guest, let me know. And if this show resonated with you in any way, please, 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 by all means, share it. Okay? You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. I prefer YouTube. Just look for us. We're there. And the New Thought Media Network exists to help spread not the word of New Thought, but the joy of New Thought. Helping you to understand how you can most certainly bring about a magnificent life for yourself.
Amen to that.
All right. Thanks again, Reverend Kim. I'll talk to you soon.
It's been an honor.
And folks, if you're on the New Thought Media Network, I'll see you tomorrow morning for prayer. Be well.
Namaste.
Namaste. Indeed. Now I've got to figure out how to do this right. Okay, I got it.